Welcome back, everybody. AI ethics. That's what we're diving into today. And let me tell you, it's a minefield out there. We've got bias, surveillance, even killer robots. And of course, everyone's worrying about AI taking their jobs. Is AGI, artificial general intelligence, a good thing or a bad thing, a promise or a threat? We'll try to figure all that out. And luckily, I've got an expert here to guide us through it all. Are you ready to rethink everything you thought you knew about AI? Let's dive in.
Yeah, it's not just science fiction anymore. AI is already shaping your life, whether you realize it or not, from the stuff you see online to, who knows, maybe even your job prospects. And the more powerful AI gets, the harder those ethical questions become.
Okay, so let's start with something we hear a lot about, AI bias. I think it's easy to just say, oh, well, it's bad data, just fix the data and the problem's solved. But I feel like it's got to be more complicated than that, right?
Yeah, for sure. It goes way deeper than that. We're talking about real world consequences, like hiring algorithms that end up screening out totally qualified candidates just because of their gender or their race, or facial recognition systems that make false accusations. These aren't just technical glitches. They really reflect those biases that are already out there in society. They're baked right into the data that these AI systems are learning from.
So you're saying it's not enough to just, clean up the data. We have to make sure the AI itself isn't making those biases worse.
Exactly. And that impact can be huge. Think about facial recognition tech. Studies show that systems trained mostly on white men are much less accurate when they're trying to identify women or people of color. And that can lead to all kinds of problems, wrongful arrests, discrimination, you name it. It just reinforces the inequalities that are already there.
And that leads right into another hot topic, AI surveillance. It feels like there's this constant tug of war between privacy and security. Some people argue that facial recognition and AI surveillance can help prevent crime. But then you've got the other side, who are afraid of Big Brother watching every move they make.
Yeah, this is a debate that's happening right now, and it's getting pretty intense. You see protests breaking out against the police using facial recognition, while other people say it's absolutely essential for public safety. It comes down to how do we balance those two things, the need for security and people's right to privacy.
Is it even possible to have AI surveillance that respects our privacy? It feels like it could get out of control so easily.
It's definitely tricky, but it requires careful thought and open discussion. We need to ask those tough questions, like what level of surveillance is actually necessary? What safeguards can we put in place to make sure it's not abused? And maybe even more importantly, are there less intrusive ways to achieve the same security goals?
Okay, let's switch gears for a minute and talk about something a little more futuristic. Artificial general intelligence, AGI. This is the idea of AI that's not just good at one specific task, but it's actually as smart as a human. It can learn and solve any problem that we can. Is that even possible, or is it just something we see in movies?
AGI is where things get really interesting. It's where science fiction starts to blur with reality. You've got experts like Ray Kurzweil predicting we'll have AGI within the next few decades. Then you've got others like Jan LeCun who think it's much further off. But here's the thing, even some of those skeptics are starting to revise their timelines. They're suggesting that AGI might be closer than we think.
So it's possible that we're closer to creating AI that's as smart as we are. And that brings up a lot of big questions like, should we even be doing this?
Well, the potential benefits are enormous. Imagine AGI helping us solve climate change, developing personalized medical treatments. We could push the boundaries of scientific discovery, but there are definitely risks too. And it's not just about robots taking over the world, although that's a popular idea.
Right, Elon Musk has been pretty outspoken about the potential dangers of AGI. He's even called it an existential threat to humanity.
I think Musk's warnings are really important. They highlight the need for what's called AI alignment. Basically, that means making sure that any AGI we create shares our values and goals. If we're building an intelligence that could potentially become more intelligent than us, we need to make sure it's not going to turn against us.
So it's not enough to just create super intelligent AI. We have to figure out how to make sure it's on our side.
Exactly. It's like teaching a child right from wrong, but on a much, much bigger scale. We need to give AGI a sense of ethics, a respect for human life, and an understanding of the potential consequences of its actions.
Okay, so let's say we do figure out how to create AGI that's both safe and beneficial. What could that look like in the real world?
Oh, the possibilities are pretty mind-blowing. Think about education that's personalized for every student, tailored to their individual needs. Or AI-powered medical diagnoses that can catch diseases in their earliest stages. We could even see AGI collaborating with scientists to solve some of the world's toughest problems, like developing sustainable energy sources or finding cures for diseases that we can't cure now.
That's a pretty optimistic vision. But let's be realistic. There are also concerns about AGI being misused, right?
Of course. One major concern is the development of autonomous weapons. Sometimes people call them killer robots. These are weapon systems that can select and attack targets without any human involvement.
That sounds like something straight out of a dystopian sci-fi movie.
I know, right? But it might sound like science fiction. The technology is already being developed. And this raises some really serious ethical questions, like who's responsible if an autonomous weapon makes a mistake? What if these weapons fall into the wrong hands? And can we even be sure that these systems will follow international laws and humanitarian principles?
It feels like we're opening Pandora's box here.
We need to have these conversations now, before this technology becomes widespread. Do we want to live in a world where machines are making life or death decisions? Or do we want to make sure that human judgment and ethics are still the most important things in warfare?
Okay, we've talked about bias, surveillance, AGI, and killer robots. That's a lot to take in, and we're just getting started. But before we move on to part 2, I want to touch on one more area where AI is having a huge impact: healthcare.
Definitely, AI has the potential to completely change healthcare. From diagnosing diseases to developing new treatments, the possibilities are really exciting. But just like with any powerful technology, we have to think about the ethical implications.
So it's not all good news. What are some of the potential downsides?
One concern is making sure that AI-driven diagnoses are reliable. We need to make absolutely sure that these systems are accurate and that doctors and nurses are properly trained in how to use them and understand the results, because a wrong diagnosis could have really serious consequences.
Right, you wouldn't want to rely just on an algorithm to make life-changing medical decisions.
Exactly. And we also have to address the potential for bias in healthcare algorithms. If these systems are trained on data that's already biased, they could end up making existing health disparities worse.
So even in healthcare, this issue of bias keeps popping up.
It's a problem that's everywhere. We need to make sure that healthcare algorithms are fair and equitable, and that they don't disadvantage certain groups because of their race, gender, or how much money they make.
It sounds like AI in healthcare has the potential to do amazing things, but we have to be incredibly careful about how we develop and use it.
It's a really powerful tool, and it requires a lot of careful thought and ethical oversight. We need to make sure AI in healthcare is used to improve patient outcomes, reduce disparities, and help everyone be as healthy as possible.
I think that's a good place to wrap up part 1 of our deep dive into the ethical dilemmas of AI.
We've definitely covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to talk about.
In part 2, we'll be exploring how AI is impacting creativity and the future of work. Stay tuned.
Welcome back.
So in part 1, we went pretty deep on all those big ethical dilemmas around AI, like bias, surveillance, even those killer robots. And we talked about whether super intelligent AI, AGI, could actually be a threat to humanity. Now I want to shift gears a bit and look at how AI is really shaking things up in the creative world.
This is where AI gets really interesting, even a little mind-bending. We're seeing AI create art, write music, compose poetry, even write entire stories. It's making us rethink what it even means to be creative.
I've seen some of this AI-generated art, and honestly, it's pretty impressive. But it does make you wonder, if an algorithm can create a masterpiece, does that somehow devalue the work of human artists?
It's a valid concern, and a lot of artists are struggling with this right now. Some see AI as a threat, while others are embracing it as a new tool, like a collaborator in the creative process.
I could definitely see both sides of that. On the one hand, if anyone can just push a button and have an AI create something artistic, does that diminish all the skill and hard work that human artists put into their craft?
Right. But on the other hand, AI can open up all sorts of new creative possibilities. It allows artists to experiment with styles and techniques they might never have considered before. Think of it like a new instrument in the orchestra, one that can create sound and visuals we've never seen or heard before.
So you're saying it's not about replacing human creativity, but more about expanding the possibilities.
Exactly. And let's be honest, a lot of creative work already involves some kind of artificial assistance. Photographers use software to edit photos, musicians use digital tools to make music. AI can just be seen as an extension of that, pushing the boundaries even further.
Instead of AI versus human artists, it's more about how they can work together.
Right, we're already seeing some really cool collaborations, musicians using AI to generate melodies, then they develop those into full songs, writers using AI to overcome writer's block or try out different storylines. It can be a huge source of inspiration.
That's a really interesting way to look at it. But with all this AI-generated content coming out now, how do we make sure it's being used ethically? We don't want to end up in a world where everything's just this bland, algorithmic mush, right?
That's a crucial point. We have to be really mindful of bias creeping into AI-generated content. If the data used to train these systems is biased, it could lead to all sorts of harmful stereotypes. Imagine an AI that only generates pictures of white, able-bodied people because that's all it was trained on.
That would be a huge step backwards. We need to make sure AI reflects the diversity of the real world.
Absolutely. And then there are questions about ownership and intellectual property. Like, if an AI creates a piece of music or a painting, who owns the copyright? The person who programmed the AI, the person who provided the data, or even maybe the AI itself. These are really complex legal and philosophical questions we need to figure out as AI becomes a bigger part of the creative process.
It's like we're in completely uncharted territory, legally and creatively.
We are, and it requires us to be open to change, to experiment, and to really rethink our assumptions about creativity. AI is making us redefine what art, music, and literature even mean. It's a really exciting time to be a creator, but it's also a time to think carefully about the ethical implications.
We've talked about how AI could affect everything from art and music to the very nature of war. But what about something closer to home, our jobs? A lot of people are worried about AI taking over the workplace, automating us out of existence.
Yeah, I get that. It's a valid concern. The way we work is definitely changing, and AI is part of that. But I don't think it's as simple as robots replacing humans. It's more complicated than that.
So it's not all doom and gloom. I mean, we hear all these predictions about truck drivers, factory workers, even lawyers and doctors being replaced by algorithms.
Well, some jobs are definitely more likely to be automated than others. Tasks that are repetitive, predictable, and data-driven are the most vulnerable. Think about data entry, basic customer service, even some aspects of legal work.
So those routine, rule-based jobs are the ones at risk.
Yeah, but here's the interesting part. AI is also creating entirely new jobs. Jobs we hadn't even thought of before. Someone needs to design, build, maintain, and train these AI systems. We need data scientists, AI ethicists, people who specialize in how humans and robots interact. These are roles that didn't exist a few years ago.
So it's not just about job losses, it's about jobs transforming and new fields emerging.
Exactly. The future of work is about adapting, learning new skills, and focusing on what makes us uniquely human. Things like creativity, critical thinking, complex problem solving, emotional intelligence. AI struggles with those things, at least for now.
So instead of being afraid of AI, we should think about how to use it to our advantage.
I think so. Think of it as a partnership, not a competition. AI can handle the boring, repetitive tasks, and that frees us up to focus on the more strategic, creative, and interpersonal aspect of our jobs. It could lead to more productivity, more innovation, and even more job satisfaction.
That's a much more optimistic view than the robots are taking over narrative.
The future of work is really up to us. By embracing lifelong learning, developing those in-demand skills, and focusing on our human strengths, we can absolutely thrive in an AI-driven world.
So we've talked about bias, surveillance, AGI, killer robots, the future of work and creativity. It's been quite a journey.
It has, and it all leads to this bigger question. What does it even mean to be human in the age of AI?
Wow, that's a deep one. I don't think there's an easy answer to that.
No, there isn't, but that's part of what makes this such an exciting time. We're grappling with these fundamental questions about who we are, our place in the universe, and the nature of intelligence itself.
It's like AI is holding up a mirror to humanity, making us really examine who we are and what we value.
And the choices we make today, they're going to shape the future of AI, and ultimately the future of humanity. We have a responsibility to make sure AI is used for good, to benefit everyone.
Well said. So as we wrap up part 2, any final thoughts for our listeners?
We've covered a lot, and it's clear AI is already having a huge impact on our lives, and that impact is only going to grow. It's so important that we keep having these conversations, asking those tough questions, and demanding that AI is developed and used responsibly and ethically.
And for people who are feeling a bit overwhelmed by all this talk of bias, killer robots, and the future of work, what would you say to them?
I'd say don't be afraid to embrace the potential of AI. It's a powerful tool that could help us solve some of the world's biggest problems, things like climate change, disease, poverty. But it's up to us to make sure it's used for good, not for harm. By staying informed, talking about these issues, and demanding ethical development and use, we can shape the future of AI. We can make sure it benefits all of humanity.
I think that's a great message to end on. Join us for part 3, where we'll explore the future of AI and what it all means for the future of humanity. Welcome back to the Deep Dive.
Yeah, good to be back.
We've covered a lot of ground in this deep dive into AI, all those ethical dilemmas, the potential impact on jobs, even creativity. Now, in this final part, I want to kind of look ahead and ask, what does the future hold for AI, and what does all this mean for us, for humanity?
It's a question that I don't know, sparks both excitement and a little bit of anxiety, right? The possibilities just seem limitless. I mean, we talked about AI potentially solving some of the world's biggest challenges, climate change, diseases, poverty. It could revolutionize how we approach healthcare, how we learn, even space exploration.
But we also talked about the potential downsides, the possibility of misuse, maybe some unintended consequences, maybe AI even making existing inequalities worse. Or, like some people are worried about, AI becoming a threat in itself.
Right, and that's why this conversation is so crucial, because the future of AI, it's not predetermined. It really depends on the choices we make today.
So what are those choices? What can we do to make sure AI is developed and used responsibly?
Well, I think it starts with open discussion and collaboration. We need to have some clear guidelines, maybe even regulations, that encourage innovation, but also really prioritize ethical development. Maybe something like an AI Bill of Rights, something that protects human values like dignity, autonomy, and privacy in this new era of AI.
And who's responsible for making that happen? Is it governments, the tech companies that are actually building this stuff, researchers, or is it all of us?
I think it's a shared responsibility. We need everyone at the table. Policymakers, industry leaders, researchers, ethicists, and everyday people like you and me. We all have a stake in shaping the future of AI.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but about the values we build into it, how we decide to use it.
Exactly. AI is a tool, and just like any tool, it can be used for good or for bad. It's really up to us to decide what that future looks like.
So what can we do as individuals? I mean, it all feels so big and complicated.
Well, you can start by staying informed. Learn about AI, the good and the bad. Talk about it with your friends, your family, your colleagues. Support organizations that are working to develop AI responsibly.
What about for people who are interested in a career in AI? Any advice for them?
Oh, absolutely. Go for it. It's such a fascinating field and it's constantly evolving. But remember, with great power comes great responsibility, right? As you're building your skills, think about the ethical implications of your work. Use your knowledge to create AI that benefits everyone.
So it's not just about writing code, it's about actually shaping the future.
Exactly. The future of AI is in our hands. Let's make it one we can all be proud of.
I love that. Well, that's a perfect note to end on. Thank you so much for joining us for this deep dive into the ethical dilemmas of AI. It's been a really thought-provoking conversation.
It really has. The pleasure was all mine. I hope this inspires everyone to keep thinking about these issues, to keep asking those hard questions, and to work towards a future where AI empowers humanity and helps us build a better world for everyone.
Couldn't have said it better myself. And to all our listeners, thank you so much for tuning in. Keep those questions coming, keep exploring, and keep the conversation going. Because the future of AI is up to all of us.